My name is Damian Ballard, and I'm 32. I work as an assistant professor of literature at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, where I've spent the last 6 years building what I thought was a respectable career. After finishing my PhD at 25, I was hired as a postdoc and later moved into my current position. Growing up, I was always the responsible one, the steady son who got good grades and followed the rules. My younger brother, Adriel, 28, was different. He had that natural charisma that drew everyone to him. Our parents never tried to hide who their favorite was. Adriel became a news anchor at Televisa Monterrey, one of those guys who could charm anyone in any situation. Meanwhile, I was the professor who spent his evenings grading papers and preparing lectures. I had accepted my role as the overlooked older brother until I met Renata Salcedo. Renata was 34 then, a marketing consultant with her own firm in San Pedro Garza Garcia. We met at a faculty gathering in February 2023, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. She appreciated my intellect, laughed at my dry humor, and seemed genuinely interested in my research on Latin American literature. What I didn't realize then was that her interest in my family connections might have been stronger than her interest in me. When I proposed in December 2023, after almost a year together, she said yes without hesitation. The engagement party was held at my parents' house in Colonia del Valle, San Pedro Garza Garcia, in March 2024, the same roomy residence where Adriel and I grew up. My mother insisted on hosting it there, saying it would be more intimate than a banquet hall. About 50 guests filled the living room and spilled into the backyard. Renata looked stunning in a navy dress, effortlessly mingling with my colleagues and family friends. At 34, she carried herself with a confidence that seemed to captivate everyone, my younger brother included. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect, as I would soon discover. Around 9:30, I noticed Renata had disappeared from the main area of the party. I had been talking to my department chair about a possible grant. Adriel was nowhere to be found either, but that wasn't unusual. He often slipped away to take work calls or charm small groups with his stories. I decided to check upstairs, thinking she might have gone to freshen up or needed a quiet moment. The second floor was dim. Most guests stayed downstairs. I walked along the familiar hallway toward the bathroom, but stopped when I heard voices coming from Adriel's old room. The door was slightly ajar. I approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt if it was just a casual conversation, but as I got closer, the voices grew clearer. Renata's laugh, the one I'd fallen for, blended with Adriel's deeper tone. There was something intimate about their exchange that made my stomach tighten. I pushed the door just enough to see inside. Renata was leaning against the wall near Adriel's old desk, his hands on either side of her face. They were kissing, passionately lost in the moment, my fiancé and my brother. In the room where Adriel used to practice his high school speeches, where his football trophies once hung, where he'd charmed his girlfriends. I stood there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only seconds. For a moment, I considered flinging the door open and shouting their names, confronting them face to face, but something deeper stopped me. The betrayal hit in waves. First, the visual confirmation of what I was seeing, then the realization that this wasn't a sudden lapse of judgment. The way they moved together suggested obvious familiarity, an intimacy that couldn't have developed overnight. Neither of them noticed me. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. I reached the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at my reflection. My face was pale. My hands trembled slightly. Downstairs, the party sounds continued. Laughter, clinking glasses. Conversations about our future together, a future that had just shattered. I returned to the party 15 minutes later, having composed myself. Renata was back in the living room chatting with my aunt about wedding venues. Adriel stood near the bar, drink in hand, laughing at something my father had said. They looked normal, as if nothing had happened. "There you are," Renata said when she saw me reaching out. "I was wondering where you went." Her touch felt strange now, tainted, but I smiled and squeezed her fingers lightly. "Just needed a little air," I replied. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal haze. I watched Renata accept congratulations and talk about our August 2024 wedding plans. I watched Adriel be his usual charming self, telling newsroom stories and making everyone laugh. Neither showed a hint of guilt or discomfort. When the last guest left around midnight, my parents retreated to their room, tired but happy. Renata and I were staying the night, planning to return to Mexico City in the morning. As we got ready for bed in my old room, she was more affectionate than usual. "It was perfect," she said while brushing her teeth. "Your family really knows how to throw a party." I nodded, watching her in the mirror. "Adriel seemed to enjoy himself," I said carefully. "Oh, you know Adriel," she laughed. "He's always the life of the party. He was telling me earlier about that investigation he's working on. Something about corruption in Monterrey's municipal government." "Earlier? When exactly?" "Before or after their intimate moment in his childhood room. I didn't sleep that night. While Renata breathed peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling of my teenage bedroom, surrounded by old books and academic awards. Everything I'd worked for, everything I believed about my relationship, felt like a lie. The next morning, Adriel joined us for breakfast. He was relaxed, joking with our parents about the party and complimenting Renata on her dress. "You two make a great couple," he said, spreading butter on his sweet bread. "Damian's lucky to have found someone who appreciates his academic pursuits." The pause was subtle, but I caught it. So did Renata, who glanced at me briefly before smiling at him. "I'm the lucky one," she replied. "Damian has so much depth. Not everyone appreciates a real intellectual conversation." They were playing a game, speaking in code right in front of me. Our parents, oblivious to the undercurrent, radiated pride over their successful party. On the drive back to Mexico City, Renata was quieter than usual, looking out at the northern Mexican landscape and checking her iPhone now and then. I decided to test the waters. "Adriel seems happier lately," I said. "Marriage must suit him." Renata shifted in her seat. "Really?" I hadn't noticed. "His wife Daniela was asking about you last night," I added. "She mentioned you two should get lunch sometime." "That would be nice," Renata replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Daniela Ballard had been Adriel's wife for 4 years, a pediatric nurse at the University Hospital of Monterrey. She was kind, genuine, and devoted to my brother. She also deserved to know what kind of man she had married. Over the next week, I paid closer attention to Renata's behavior. She'd always been busy with her marketing firm, but now she seemed to have more late-night meetings than usual. Her phone, which she used to leave casually on counters and tables, was constantly in her hand or tucked away in her purse. The breakthrough came the following Friday. Renata said she had a client dinner that would run late, suggesting I shouldn't wait up. But at 8 p.m., as I walked to my car after evening office hours, I saw Adriel's silver 2022 BMW 330i parked outside Quintanil, an upscale restaurant in Polanco. I didn't confront them. Instead, I drove home and waited. Renata came back at 11:15, claiming the client dinner had been productive but exhausting. She went straight to shower, avoiding eye contact. That night, lying beside her, I made my decision. I wasn't going to explode in rage or create a dramatic scene. That would give them a narrative they could control, painting me as the unstable, jealous brother who couldn't handle losing to Adriel again. Instead, I would be strategic. I'd document everything, protect myself financially, and when the time was right, I'd make sure the truth came out in a way that couldn't be disputed or manipulated. The next morning, I opened a new savings account at Citibanamex, separate from our shared BBVA account. I deposited 30,000 pesos of my personal savings to start. I began photographing important documents and quietly moving my most valuable possessions to my office at the university. I also started keeping a detailed record of Renata's absences and inconsistencies. More importantly, I documented Adriel's public appearances and social media presence. As a local TV personality in Monterrey, he'd built his career on trust and family values. Any scandal could damage that carefully crafted image. 3 weeks after the engagement party, in early April 2024, things reached a breaking point. I'd been observing every gesture, every lie, every unexplained absence. Renata announced she needed time to think about our relationship, that the engagement was moving too fast, and she needed space to be sure about our future. I listened calmly, nodding at the right moments. When she finished, I asked just one question. How long has this been going on with Ercel? The color drained from her face. For a moment, her composed facade cracked, and I saw real fear in her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. I saw you, I said simply. At the engagement party? In Ercel's room. Renata's shoulders sagged, as if the air had left her lungs. She sat heavily on our couch, the same couch where we had planned our wedding just weeks before. Damian, I can explain— How long? I repeated. She fell silent for almost a minute, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Since January, just weeks after our engagement, while she still wore the ring I'd saved months to buy. Does Daniela know? I asked. Renata shook her head. Ercel said he'd handle his situation when the time was right. His situation? I laughed, humorless. You mean his marriage? His wife who loves him. She started crying then, but I felt nothing, no sympathy, no urge to comfort her. Those tears were for herself, not for the damage she'd caused. I never meant for this to happen, she sobbed. It just happened. Ercel understands me in ways that— Enough, I cut in. Stop talking. I went to our room and pulled out the suitcase I had already packed and hidden in the closet. Renata followed, still crying, still trying to explain the inexplicable. Where are you going? I'm staying at a hotel near campus, I said, zipping the bag. You have until Sunday to move out. Damian, please, we can work through this. It was a mistake. No, I said, turning to face her. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. Double booking a dinner. This was a deliberate choice, made repeatedly for 3 months, to betray someone who loved you. I left that afternoon and didn't look back. By Sunday, Renata had moved out, leaving only the engagement ring on the kitchen counter. The hard part was telling my parents. I drove to San Pedro Garza Garcia the following Saturday morning and found them in their usual weekend routine, my father reading Reforma while my mother tended her garden. The engagement is off, I announced. My mother looked up from her roses, gardening gloves stained with soil. What happened? Did you two have a fight? Renata has been having an affair with Ercel since January, I said. My father's newspaper crinkled as he lowered it. My mother's trowel dropped to the ground. That's impossible, my father said. Ercel wouldn't— I saw them together, I cut in. At the engagement party? In his room. My mother sank onto her gardening stool. Oh, Damian, there must be some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Renata confirmed everything. What happened next was worse than the betrayal itself. Instead of outrage at Ercel's behavior, instead of support for their betrayed son, my parents went straight into damage control mode. You can't tell Daniela, my mother said immediately. Think what this would do to her marriage. She's such a sweet girl. Think about Ercel's career, my father added. If this goes public, it could ruin everything he's worked for. I stared at them in disbelief. What about my life? What about what this did to me? Of course we're heartbroken for you, my mother rushed to say. But these things happen, Damian. People fall out of love. Renata obviously realized she made a mistake choosing you when Ercel was available. The words hit like a physical blow. A mistake choosing me? Don't take it personally, my father said. You're a wonderful person, but Ercel has always been more dynamic. Women are drawn to that confidence. So this is my fault. For not being charismatic enough? No one's saying that, my mother replied. But dragging everyone through a scandal won't change anything. Renata's gone. It's over. Let it be. I want Ercel to know that I know, I said. Absolutely not, my father snapped. You will not destroy your brother's life over this. We'll handle it quietly within the family. I left their house understanding exactly where I stood in their hierarchy. Ercel's reputation mattered more than my pain. His marriage was more important to protect than acknowledging what he'd done to me. 2 days later, Ercel called. His voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear the tension underneath. I heard about you and Renata, he said. I'm sorry things didn't work out. You're sorry? I asked. Pause. Of course. You're my brother. Yes, and yet somehow my fiancé ended up in your arms. Another longer pause. I don't know what you think happened. I know exactly what happened, Adriel. Renata told me everything. 3 months of lies, 3 months of betraying the brother who always defended you. Damian, listen. No, you listen. I'm not going to destroy your marriage or your career, not because I care about protecting you, but because I refuse to let this become a story of your victimhood. For once in our lives, this is about me. I hung up before he could answer. Within 2 weeks, consequences started unfolding naturally. Daniela noticed Adriel's guilty behavior and began asking direct questions. Renata, emotionally unstable after our breakup and consumed by guilt, got sloppy about hiding her continued contact with Adriel. The confrontation between Adriel and Daniela happened on a Tuesday night in late April 2024. I only found out because Daniela called me the next morning, her voice hollow with shock. Damian, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Did Adriel have an affair with Renata? I chose my words carefully. I discovered something at my engagement party that ended my relationship. With Adriel? Yes. Silence stretched between us. When Daniela spoke again, she was crying. I found WhatsApp messages, months of them. I'm filing for divorce, Damian. I wanted you to know first, and I want you to know how sorry I am. You deserved so much better from all of us. Daniela filed for divorce in early May 2024. Practical and decisive. She documented everything, hired a competent lawyer, and made it clear she wanted nothing from Adriel except her freedom. With no children and her desire for a clean break, they reached an uncontested settlement. The case moved quickly through Nuevo Leon's family courts, finalized by the end of 2024. My parents' reaction was predictable and infuriating. This is your fault, my mother accused during a heated call. If you had kept quiet, Daniela would never have found out. Her marriage could have been saved. Saved? I replied. You mean covering up Adriel's affair and letting him keep lying to his wife? Marriages go through hard times, my father said. Couples work things out privately. You've destroyed a family. Adriel destroyed his own family when he chose to cheat, I said. I simply refused to help him hide it. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were angrier at me for not covering up Adriel's behavior than at Adriel for the behavior itself. Meanwhile, Adriel's carefully crafted public image began to crack. As a news anchor in Monterey, he'd built his brand on being the trustworthy family man. But divorce proceedings create public records, and Monterey's media community is small and gossipy. By summer 2024, rumors about Adriel's personal troubles were circulating. His on-air performance remained professional, but his social media presence turned defensive. Instagram shifted from family photos to generic motivational quotes. He posted less about his personal life on Facebook, and at public events he appeared tense and distracted. Management took notice. Local news depends heavily on audience trust, and personal scandals erode that quickly. By late 2024, it was clear his contract wouldn't be renewed when it expired in March 2025. I buried myself in academic work with renewed focus. I published a paper on themes of betrayal in Latin American literature that drew attention from colleagues at major universities. The research felt personal now. I understood betrayal and redemption in ways I never had before. That's when Luciana Fonseca entered my life. She contacted our university's research department in October 2024, 6 months after my breakup with Renata. That time had been necessary, 6 months to process the betrayal, rebuild myself, and be ready for something real. Luciana, 35, was an architect who specialized in academic spaces. Our department had received a federal grant to renovate our seminar and reading rooms, and her firm was recommended for the project. Our first meeting was purely professional. She arrived at my office with plans and material samples, asking detailed questions about how the space would be used. There was something refreshing about her frankness, solutions over empty charm. Professor Ballard, she said, studying the current layout. These seminar rooms have good bones, but whoever designed them didn't understand how humanities discussions really work. I found myself laughing for the first time in months, probably because they were built by the lowest bidder in the 90s. She smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. unlike Renata's. Well, we can fix that. Academic spaces should foster collaboration and deep thinking, especially for literature seminars. Over the next weeks, we met regularly to discuss the renovation. Luciana was thorough, asking about lighting needs, storage, and how students and faculty would actually use the rooms. Gradually, our conversations expanded beyond the project. "You really seem to understand what professors need," I told her during a planning session in November 2024. "My father was a chemistry professor at the University of Guadalajara," she explained. "I grew up watching him struggle with poorly designed spaces. That's why I specialize in academic architecture." There was a depth to Luciana I hadn't expected. She wasn't trying to impress or manipulate me. She was simply competent, intelligent, and genuine in a way that felt refreshing after Renata's calculated performances. The renovation took 4 months, finishing in February 2025. By then, Luciana and I had moved from professional collaborators to friends, and gradually to something deeper. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than just chemistry. When I finally told her about Renata and Adriel, we were sitting in one of the newly renovated seminar rooms in March 2025, sharing tacos and reviewing the project's final paperwork. "I was engaged until last year," I said, testing the waters. Luciana looked up. "What happened?" "She was having an affair with my brother." I expected sympathy, maybe shock. Instead, she set down her food and studied my face. "That explains some things," she said. "What things?" "Why you're so careful with boundaries. Why it took you months to ask me for coffee outside of work. Why you seem genuinely surprised when I keep my promises." It was the most perceptive observation anyone had made about me in years. "Does it bother you?" I asked. "The complications." "Everyone has a past, Damian," she said. "The question is whether you've learned from it, or if it's still running your present." By then, Adriel's career in Monterrey was effectively over. His contract wasn't renewed in March 2025, and he was forced to take a job at a small cable operation in Ciudad Victoria, Tamaulipas, a significant step down from his previous role. His salary dropped from about 80,000 pesos a month to barely 25,000, and his audience shrank drastically. 10 months after meeting Luciana, in August 2025, during the intense summer heat wave in Mexico City, I proposed to her in one of the seminar rooms she had designed for our department. It wasn't traditionally romantic, but it was perfect for who we were, a space we built together, representing our collaborative future. She said yes immediately, then made a request. "Promise me you'll never shrink yourself again to make others comfortable. You've earned your place in this world." I promised. Planning our wedding was nothing like the elaborate production Renata had orchestrated. Luciana wanted something meaningful and intimate, with people who truly supported us. We found a cancellation at a beautiful venue in Cuernavaca and scheduled the wedding for the first week of September 2025, just a few weeks away, but perfect for what we envisioned. The expected complication arose when my parents insisted on attending and bringing Adriel. "He's your brother," my mother argued during a tense August call. "This family has been divided long enough. It's time to heal and move forward." "Adriel destroyed his marriage and betrayed me," I said. "There's nothing to heal." "That was over a year ago," my father added. "People make mistakes. You need to forgive and let the family come together." "I have moved on," I said. "I've moved toward people who understand that trust and loyalty aren't negotiable." But they persisted, threatening not to attend unless Adriel was included, accusing me of being vindictive and unforgiving, deploying every guilt tactic from my childhood. I gave them my answer. "If Adriel shows up at my wedding, you're both uninvited. I won't let the most important day of my life become another chance to prioritize your comfort over mine." They hung up, just as I expected. Luciana found me afterward, looking at my phone in our kitchen. "What did they decide?" she asked. "They chose him, as they always do." She wrapped her arms around me. "Then we'll have exactly the wedding we want, with exactly the people who deserve to be there." And we did. Our wedding day, Saturday, September 6, 2025, was everything I'd hoped for. Small, genuine, joyful. My university colleagues came, along with Luciana's family and our closest friends. The absence of my parents and Adriel was noticeable but not painful. I had built a real chosen family, but Adriel couldn't resist making one last scene. He showed up at our reception about an hour after it started, clearly drunk and bitter. Later, I learned he got the venue and time from a sympathetic cousin. Security tried to stop him, but he pushed past and grabbed the microphone during the toasts. "Ladies and gentlemen," he slurred, his polished anchor voice warped by alcohol and resentment, "I'd like to say something about my brother Damian." The room went silent. Luciana's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. I stood calmly, walked to the front, and took the microphone from Adriel's unsteady hands. "Thank you, Adriel," I said, my voice clear and firm. "Since you decided to crash my wedding uninvited, allow me to share something with our guests about my brother." His face went pale. He tried to snatch the mic back, but I stepped away. "A year and a half ago," I continued, scanning the room, "this man had an affair with my fiancée. When I discovered them together, my parents asked me to stay quiet to protect his reputation and his career. They said his image mattered more than my pain. Today, on my wedding day, those same parents threatened to boycott unless I invited the person who betrayed me. When I refused, they chose him over me. Again." Adriel started to speak, but I kept going. "But I'm grateful. Their betrayal taught me the difference between the family you're born into and the family you choose. I choose the people in this room, people who show up when they say they will, who celebrate successes instead of undermining them, who understand that loyalty isn't conditional." I handed the microphone back to our coordinator and returned to my seat beside Luciana. Adriel stood there for a moment, exposed and humiliated, before stumbling out. Several guests actually applauded as he left. Enough people witnessed the incident that news spread quickly through the tight-knit professional communities of Monterrey and Mexico City. For someone whose career was already struggling due to personal scandal, this public display of drunken unprofessionalism was devastating. Within days, his small cable job in Ciudad Victoria ended when the story reached media circles in the Northeast. That night, lying beside my wife in our Cuernavaca hotel room, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, complete peace. "Any regrets?" Luciana asked softly. "None," I said. "I spent 32 years trying to earn their approval. Tonight I realized I had something better: self-respect." Adriel's downward spiral accelerated after that public humiliation. The mix of professional failure, personal scandal, and his behavior at my wedding made him essentially unemployable in Northeastern media. Last I heard, he was working part-time at a small community radio station in Nuevo Laredo, earning barely 12,000 pesos a month, a dramatic fall from his previous 80,000. At Televisa, my parents made a few half-hearted attempts at reconciliation in the days after the wedding, but the foundation was permanently cracked. They had shown me exactly where I ranked in their priorities, and I finally stopped competing for conditional love. Luciana and I built something genuine together. Her architecture practice expanded, opening a second office in Guadalajara. My academic career flourished. I was promoted to full professor at UNAM and received a CONACYT research grant to study narratives of betrayal in contemporary Mexican literature. We created a partnership built on mutual respect, shared goals, and unwavering loyalty to each other. Some colleagues have asked if I ever regretted exposing Adriel so publicly at my wedding. The answer is simple. I don't regret telling the truth. I regret that it took me 32 years to realize I deserved better than being the backup son. The real victory wasn't destroying Adriel or cutting off my parents. The real victory was learning that the best revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. It's refusing to let them hurt you anymore. The best revenge was choosing my peace over their chaos.